Let's have a look at the Tempest. All right, so in the Tempest, Prospero is exiled by the nobles. It's kind of like royalty, right? It's the people who are in power in this feudal system. So that's where you're born into power. Like a monarchy, you have the king or the queen, and then you have the prince, and you have all the people who live in the castle, right? So these are the highest status people in this society. We don't quite have that now. I know we still have a queen and we still have that bloodline going on in England, right? Australia still technically is subservient to England in that respect, but basically we just have elected prime ministers. We have a more democratic system. Do you understand the difference? It was not to say it wasn't it wasn't undemocratic in a sense, but the people who got into power didn't really earn it through popular vote. You see that? They were just born into it. And they were the people who really got to dictate how society ran. So there's a big contextual dissonance for you, because you'll notice that who do Antonio and Alonso, who do they become in Hag-Seed? Tony and Sal, right? But what's their roles? When they come to visit the prison, because remember, Felix goes and works at the prison to put on the performance of the Tempest, they're ministers. So do you see they're ministers, whereas here Antonio and Alonso are nobles? Do you see that contextual difference there? That on one hand we have elected ministers, even though Antonio shows signs of being corrupt, right? We have elected ministers in a democratic society, and then here in this feudal society, we have the nobles who have the power, right? So Prospero was a duke. He was the Duke of Milan, and he got exiled for his neglect of that duty. He basically got banished and sent off to an island. He loved magic, right? So he was obsessed with his books, his magic books. That's good. So he actually says, look, I cared more about magic than my role as the Duke. So he actually was neglectful of his role, to be fair to Antonio and Alonso who exiled him. Not to say it warranted being banished to an island, but basically saying he was neglecting his duties, because Prospero doesn't really factor that in throughout his revenge, wouldn't you say? He's kind of just blaming them and he's just angry. But actually he needs to take some accountability before he wants to be the Duke again and let go of that magic. Now, he then goes to an island, and by the way, do we see all of that happen? It's with dramatic form, we probably wouldn't call it, you're right, in the flashback sense. In the novel, it's a flashback, but in the play, this plays it's through the dialogue only. And do you see how that's kind of all you can do with a play of this kind, unless you go back in time and have a separate act or scene set back then? You can kind of only have things conveyed through dialogue. That's part of the dialogic form, that the way we learn about Prospero's past is through his dialogue to Miranda. Okay? And what's happened is Prospero's been on this island for something like 12 years, and he basically has taken over the island with his magic, because he was so preoccupied with his magic initially. He gets banished to this island and he takes over it. And he's actually controlling Caliban, who was the native. He's basically enslaved Caliban. Caliban works for him. And Ariel, is the spirit that helps Prospero on the island do things. But Ariel's really enslaved as well. And Miranda, his daughter, is enslaved in a way, because he controls what she knows. And he basically, whatever he teaches her are the limits of what she can know. So there's all these forms of imprisonment that are established early on, and actually that are implied. So all of these things are implied early on. Now, the play begins with the Tempest. What aspect of form does that relate to? So everyone write down that the play begins in the middle of action. And the term for that is 3 words, in space medias space res. So the play commences in media res, but with an S on the media. So in medias res. That means it begins in the middle of action. So Shakespeare commences the play in the middle of action. In medias res is the term. And that basically brings the audience immediately into a landscape of chaos, okay? So there's a situation, a scene of chaos at the beginning when Prospero has come across his enemies, right? They were coming back from a wedding, I believe, of Alonso's daughter. She was getting married in Africa, and they're on a ship, and Prospero sees this, right? And it's kind of this, in this moment of fate, he sees this star and he's able to lure them in, or he summons this star rather, and he lures them in and creates this kind of tempest, which is a storm, by the way, for everyone, right? A tempest is a storm, and he creates this storm and basically sweeps them in to the island so that he can get his revenge on them, because these are the guys who had betrayed him in the past. Now what happens is, as he brings them into the island, note there in the second box, he becomes the director of a metaphorical performance, because now he has contrived, as you said, he conjures up with his magic, and then they're brought in, shipwrecked basically on the island, because he uses his magic and also, you know, his stage crew, his metaphorical stage crew, which is like Caliban and Ariel, rather. He uses them to actually manipulate the characters and to coordinate the scenes that go on the island. So he's basically like a director. So Prospero with his magic is able to direct everything that happens on the island. So everyone write down that the fact that Prospero is a metaphorical director, there's a metaphorical performance going on, means that there is a performance, but it's a play that's happening within a broader play. Does everyone see that? So we're looking at the Tempest. If we're in the audience watching the Tempest, we're watching a play. Within that play is another play going on, because Prospero is running his own play on the island. Figuratively speaking, obviously, he's not a literal director on the island. He'll become a literal director in Hag-Seed, because Margaret Atwood wants to make that obvious to us. Does everyone see what's happening? We're watching a play, and within that play is another performance going on, which is basically directed by Prospero using his magic. So Prospero is like a theater director inside of this play, The Tempest.